could see what happened. It was quite obvious that it got overtopped. I mean, you can see, ruts from essentially a waterfall coming over the top, dug out the ground on the land side of the levee, and as that eroded deeper and deeper, remember you got this waterfall of water coming over it, then the levee just fell down. And in fact, that barge, I'm pretty sure, in my own opinion, was sucked through after the break. It was not a cause of the break. You got to remember that the wind was blowing 100 miles an hour away from the break. So the idea that a barge is floating into 100-mile-an-hour wind and breaking the levee seems unlikely. In fact, it seems impossible.
Since Hurricane Katrina, the city spent many, many months developing a series of plans to help the city to recover, to rebuild the city, to return it to its former self. The first of these plans was done by the Urban Land Institute and was an utter failure, not so much because of the ideas it contained, but because of the way it was presented. It was presented as a way that looked to many people like they were going to promote confiscation of private property and turning of that land over to outside economic developers, when in fact the idea was to try to create safe zones, green areas, green zones, and that people would be encouraged to leave those areas and move to safer ground. But the plan was presented as an economic development plan and not as a safety plan. And I think it failed mainly on those accounts. When you looked at the maps that were shown in the city newspaper, it showed these economic development zones. If they had redrawn the maps, if they had instead of green areas, meaning parks, and had them labeled as red hazard zones, flood hazard zones, I think we'd have had an entirely different response to that map. Talk to the people who live around the Agricultural Street landfill. They've been trying to get help to move away from there for over a decade because it's been labeled a hazard area. These areas were not labeled hazards, they were labeled as parks, and people felt they were going to lose their property and it was going to be converted to parks, or they were going to bring in the Donald Trumps of the world to build condominiums.
Questions, was it a conspiracy theory or was it incompetence? I think it's a little bit of both. I think, I used to lean more toward the incompetence side, but I think I've been somewhat convinced that, there was an idea that maybe some of these areas shouldn't have been settled in the first place, which is frankly probably true.